Hello, I'm John Connolly, the author, and I'm going to read you a little short extract from my new book, Hell's Bells. For those of you who may not be entirely familiar with our story so far, here's a chance for you to catch up. And by the way, what kind of person are you reading the second part of a series before the first? I mean, really? Do you put your socks on before your shoes, or brush your teeth in the morning immediately before drinking your orange juice? Now the rest of the readers have to hang around, whistling and examining their fingernails in a bored manner, while I give you special treatment. I bet you're the sort who arrives halfway through the movie, spilling your popcorn and standing on toes, then taps the bloke next to you on the shoulder and says, "Have I missed anything?" It's people like you who cause unrest. Anyway, when last we met, the Great Malevolence, aided by the demon known as Baal, was trying to harness the power of the Large Hadron Collider, a massive particle accelerator in Switzerland that was trying to recreate the moments after the Big Bang in order to open the gates of hell and force his way into our world. Baal passed through a portal connecting hell to earth and disguised itself as a woman named Mrs. Abernathy, having, of course, first killed the original Mrs. Abernathy and taken on her appearance. At the last minute, just as the Great Malevolence and his army were about to pass through the portal and take over the earth, Mrs. Abernathy's plans were foiled by a small boy named Samuel Johnson, his dachshund Boswell, and an inept, though well-meaning demon named Nerd, the scourge of 5 deities. All clear? Good. The Great Malevolence still wasn't quite sure how his plan had failed, and he didn't care. For a moment he had glimpsed a hole between dimensions, a possibility of escape from hell. And then that portal had been closed, just as he was about to leave his dreary kingdom behind. All of his bloodied hopes, all of his shadowy dreams, had come to nothing. And the closeness of his triumph had driven him insane. That wasn't to say that he wasn't mad already. The Great Malevolence had always been madder than a bag of badgers, madder even than a colony of bats trapped in a big biscuit tin. Now, though, he had passed into another realm of craziness entirely, and significant portions of hell had been filled with the sounds of his wailing ever since the portal had blinked out of existence. It was a terrible sound, that cry of rage and despair, ceaseless and unvarying. Even by the standards of hell, it was very annoying indeed, echoing from the Great Malevolence's lair deep inside the mountain of despair, through tunnels and labyrinths, through dungeons and the bowels of the odd dragon, until at last it reached the doorway that led from its hiding place into the dreadful landscape beyond. The doorway was most impressive, intricately carved with terrifying faces whose expressions were ever-changing, and horrific forms whose bodies intertwined so that the very entrance itself seemed to be alive. At this precise moment, the doorway was being guarded by 2 demons. In the classic manner of double acts everywhere, they were perfect opposites. One guard was tall and thin, with features that suggested an irritating and somewhat overweight child had spent a lot of time hanging from the guard's chin by its hands, thereby stretching the guard's face into a very mournful expression. His colleague was shorter and fatter. In fact, he looked like he might have eaten the irritating overweight child as a favour to his fellow guard. Brompton, the thinner of the two, had been guarding the doorway for so long that he had forgotten what he was supposed to be guarding it against, given that the most awful being it was possible to imagine was already in residence inside the mountain. During the centuries that he had spent leaning on his spear, occasionally dozing or scratching himself where polite demons didn't usually scratch themselves in public, he could not, until recently, recall a great many instances of individuals trying to get in who weren't already entitled to pass freely. Oh, a couple of demons had tried to escape from inside the mountain, largely to avoid being torn apart as a punishment for something or other, or occasionally just for a bet. But otherwise things had been very quiet around there, in a hellish way, for a very, very long time. His colleague, Edgefast, was a new arrival. Brompton regarded him suspiciously from beneath his helmet. Edgefast wasn't leaning sufficiently on his spear for Brompton's liking, and he had not yet proposed skiving off for a cup of tea or a nap. Instead, Edgefast seemed to be standing up very straight, and he had a disconcerting gleam in his eye, the kind of gleam associated with someone who actually likes his job, and even worse, plans to do it as well as possible. Brompton, by contrast, had not yet found a job that he might be inclined to like or do well, and was of the opinion that such an occupation did not exist, which suited him just fine. A job, as far as Brompton was concerned, was something that somebody made you do when you'd really rather be doing nothing at all. And to find out what happens next, you'll have to read the book, Hell's Bells.